We have a treat this morning. Kerry Gough is here to share with us. Come on up, Kerry. I want to introduce to you a distinguished Christian brother. And when I say distinguished, I mean that. Kerry graduated from Bold. That brings distinction. And then joined the U.S. Justice Department. And I think some of his early experiences in that job has changed his life, that he says, and I think he's going to share most of that today. But let me tell you that he was working for 40 years in, what was the name of the firm, Kerry?
Monterey Gough.
Monterey Gough. And he's a civil rights and, what do you call it, injury?
Personal injury.
Personal injury. That calling came from his early experiences. But let me read this bit of this bio. It's remarkable, and it's so much that I can't memorize it. He's a member of the Board of Directors of Global Strategy, Board of Directors of Children Rising, President of the Legal Aid Society of Alameda County, Board of Directors of the Alameda County Bar, President of the Allied Fellowship Service. It just goes on. And he has been a longtime member of First Pres, he and his wife, and served on the, what do we call it, the foundation, First Pres Foundation, for many, many years. So welcome, Kerry. The title of his talk is, what was it? It's...
My talk?
Yeah.
Well, you're going to have to wait and hear.
No. Okay. I think he calls it a curse or a blessing.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
Gary, why don't you step on those cords?
Yeah.
We don't need a personal injury.
Thank you all for having me here this morning. You know, it's been quite a while since I did any public speaking. I've addressed many a jury, and then I got to thinking, well, this is a room full of Christian men. They'll probably be a lot more forgiving than many of the juries I spoke to. So, anyway, I'm going to talk about a number of events that in my life that influenced the direction and my understanding of my life. Events that started way back in 1961 when I was drafted. There have been many nudges, little pats on my shoulder, silent voices that have influenced me, that directed my life. I imagine many of you have had events that happened to you and you changed your direction of your life, but you didn't give a lot of thought to it. It's just, for me, for many years, and actually, where's Mike? When Mike asked me to speak here, and I decided I would, I had to start thinking about my life and what changed my direction. We'll get into that in a minute. But I often ask, was it just luck? Or was I being nudged by an invisible hand? So in 1961, I was drafted. And that would be a 2-year commitment. The Vietnam War was starting up. I wasn't really concerned because I didn't know where I was going in my life. I figured, well, in those 2 years I'm in the service, I can have some time to think about what I do. I've been an English major, so I had this fantasy. I'd become an English professor. And like at UCSB, where I went, sunny UCSB, I had these fantasies of sitting on the lawn, surrounded by beautiful co-eds. No male students, surrounded by beautiful co-eds. And they would say, oh, Professor Gough, Dr. Gough, your lecture was so cool. Or the fantasy of going to New York and getting a Master's of Fine Arts and going to the publishing business and someday writing a best-selling novel. Oh, I had all those thoughts. So I'm drafted. My wife and I are looking for a place to live in Monterey. I'm at Fort Ord, stationed there. And I needed a map, so one day I wandered into the Monterey Peninsula Chamber of Commerce and Visitors Bureau, and lo and behold, there was a soldier there sitting behind the counter. So we got to talk, what in the world do they have a soldier here for? I said, well, housing is full at the post at Fort Ord, and they sent me down here to run a rental bureau, so to help officers and enlisted men find rentals in the Monterey Peninsula. And he said, well, I'm getting out of the service soon, and Sergeant Vaughn out at Fort Ord Housing said, find your replacement. Are you a college graduate? Oh, yeah, I'm a college graduate. Great. So things happened. I interviewed the job, and I was hired to become the military representative to the Monterey Peninsula Chamber of Commerce and Visitors Bureau. Oh, what a cushy job that was. I found an apartment on Ocean View Boulevard in Pacific Grove. These big windows looking right out on the bay. I'd put up a hammock. I could lie there and watch the otters in the bay. Some days the tourist bus would stop below the window, and I'd be lying in the hammock, and I'd look down. One of these tourists were taking pictures of this dude lying in his hammock. I never had to go to Fort Ord, except never got KP, never had Reveille. I went out to Fort Ord once a month to take a report on my rental listings. Weekends, my wife and I, we learned to scuba. We'd go scuba diving out at Point Lobos. We had a good friend who was a superintendent down at Big Sur. We'd go down there, spend some time with them. The job took about half my time, and the other half, they put me to work as one of the greeters at the Chamber of Commerce. I waited on tourists, told them about the 17-mile drive, about the golf courses, about restaurants and so forth. I had really the best possible job you could have, being a draftee. And because the Army wanted to have somebody with some color on their shoulder, hey, when you're drafted, you're a buck private. Generally speaking, to become a sergeant, it takes 3-4 years. Within a year, I had Specialist 5. That's equivalent to 3 stripes, a buck sergeant. Because they waived a lot of regulations. They wanted the GI down there to have color on his shoulder, and I had to be really sharp. Brass always had to be polished, no stains or spots in the uniform. Hey, I could put up with that because this was such a cushy job. So a bit about the job. The Army supplied me with these 5x8 cards, pre-printed by the Army, on which I would list. Landlords would call me and say, hey, I got a rental. So I'd find out how many bedrooms, what was the price, was it furnished or unfurnished, blah, blah, blah. And at the bottom of this card, it said restrictions: children, pets, racial. Now, bear in mind, this was 1961, 62, and 63. This is before any legislation outlawing housing discrimination. And here I was raised in Alaska. There were 3 black kids in my school. I played football with one of them, Truman and I were on the football team together. Race had never entered into any of my involvement in life up to this time. And I had no excuses, but I blithely, yes, now, are there any restrictions? Oh, yeah, we don't take blacks. We don't take, well, that it was Negroes. I didn't use the word black or African American, it was Negroes. We don't take any Negroes. But, okay, check with racial restrictions. No excuses. I did it. It was legal, but it certainly wasn't moral. And then, after I'd probably handed my listings to probably hundreds of black GIs, Hispanic GIs, never had anybody complain about that restriction. One day, this really sharp captain comes in. He's got all the spaghetti on his chest, all the awards, spit and polish. Comes in, especially, yes, sir. Sergeant Vaughn out of Post Housing says he hasn't got anything vacant in officer housing on post, but he says, you've got some listings. Yes, sir, I do. So I had these binders. How large a place do you need? I've got 3 or 4 kids. Okay, here's my listings for 3 and 4 bedroom places, and you're probably gonna need at least 3 bedrooms. I got out a map. Okay, here we are, Captain, and here's Monterey, blah, blah, Pacific Grove, Carmel, Marina, Seaside. And so I hand in my books with the 3 and 4 bedroom places, and I sit back down at my desk, and I'm sitting there doing whatever I'm doing. Specialist, yes, sir. I come back up to the counter. Specialist. He's got one of the books open. He's looking me up and down. Specialist. Exactly what does this mean? Well, of course he knew what it meant, but he wanted to hear it all now. Well, sir, and that means that they won't rent to you because you're a Negro. Specialist. Haven't you been informed by your commander that President Kennedy has issued an executive order that no military installation is to cooperate with off-post restricted rentals? No, sir. Nobody told me that. I'm sorry, sir, but I didn't know. He didn't get angry with me. I could see fire in his eyes, but he was an example of calmness. I'm sure he wouldn't break the Legion into battle. He was calm, collected. He didn't anger me. He said, well, Specialist, I'm going to go back out to post housing and talk to Sergeant Vaughn about this. He leaves. I get on the phone. I call someone. Hey, Sergeant, there was this Negro captain tells me what we're doing is illegal. And he's coming out to see you. Gough. That's just PR. Don't pay any attention. That's just the president's PR. Just mind your own business and get back to it. But Sergeant, it's against the law. Just take care of your business there. But he's coming out to say, yeah, well, I've got a place. Oh, he said that you didn't have a place. I've got a place. I've got plenty of places in officer housing. Sergeant Vaughn turned out, and you'll hear later, he's a real racist. He turned this black captain away, even though he had vacancies in officers' housing. Well, for the first time in my life, I was bothered about this. I got to thinking, all those GIs I've handed these books to, full of listings, over 2/3 of which they couldn't rent because they were black. It really bothered me. And I went to a meeting in Seaside where most of the blacks live in the Monterey Peninsula and still do, frankly. So I don't remember whether it was Congress, I think it was CORE, Congress of Racial Equality. Anyway, I sat around, I told them what was going on, and I left that meeting that evening with this ringing in my ears. Specialist, Gough, you've got to do something. But what could a lowly specialist do taking on the Army? What in the world can I do? Well, it came to me. I'd been assistant editor of the student newspaper in Santa Barbara, UCSB. I knew about the power of the press. And I'd been doing some work in my off time for the guy that owned the Seaside Sentinel, which is a little weekly or bi-weekly newspaper. I called him and told him. He ran the story on the front page. That story ran. I came in the Chamber of Commerce after it ran, the day after it ran, and the day it ran. And Margie Setchell, who was the woman that ran the place, it used to be, oh, Kerry, how you doing? What a beautiful day. How's things going? This morning, Specialist Gough, she never called me, but Specialist Gough called Sergeant Vaughn immediately. So I called Sergeant Vaughn. Gough, I'm sending a car for you. You and me, major in charge of housing, have got to go see the commanding general. And Gough, I put in for an early out. I was destined to get out of the service at the end of September. Law school at Bolt, here at Cal, was starting end of August, first part of September. I put in for an early out, and Sergeant, you're not getting your early out. I'm going to have you, I'm cutting orders. I've got them in front of me. I'm cutting orders to send you down to some base in Georgia where they know how to handle, and he said end-lovers, but he didn't abbreviate. He used the whole word. They know how to take care of end-lovers like you, Gough. So The Chevy comes, a little brown Chevy, picks me up. We stop at the housing office for Lord and pick up the major there and Sergeant Vaughn. We go out to the commanding general's office. They sit me down by the door, and I tell you, that was a huge office. I was probably as far from here as to the food table there. And there's all this brass, the commanding general in the middle of this conference table, brass around, and they got the newspaper, their heads are together, they're talking. I can't hear what they're saying, but I'm sitting there, oh, what did I have in mind? I was going to get out in a few months. Oh my God, why didn't I just keep my mouth shut? I was really worried. What am I going to get shipped down south? My wife was going to have to look for a place for law school, and maybe I won't even get in because I'll be late. I'm sitting there feeling sorry for myself, being mad at myself. Specialist, Commanding General. I march over, stand at attention. I'm shaking, my knees are shaking. General eyes me up and down. Oh God, I hope my glasses are polished. I hope there's no spots on my uniform. Seems like forever as I've been this. Specialist Gough. You are to return to your duty post. You are to call each of your landlords who has indicated racial restrictions. You're to tell that landlord that unless he or she is willing to rent to anyone without regard to race, that you'll have to remove their listings from your books. Yes, sir. Good. And then he kind of looks up at me, and I swear there was just a hint of a smile on his face. And said, Specialist Gough, sir, the next time that you want to have a press conference, you clear it first with base PR. Is that understood, Gough? Yes, sir. I left. The Chevy was waiting for me. Drove me back to Monterey to the Chamber of Commerce. I started going through my books. I lost about 2/3 of my listings. So, I guess that captain coming in was the first nudge, the first touch that was directing my life. What was the next touch? Well, I got out of the service. I went to law school. And between the second and third year of law school, I was a good student. I was a candidate for law review, which meant I was in about the top 10% of my class at Bolt. You know, I was a good student, but I was not a scholar. I had to do research for a really nice professor who ended up on the Oregon Supreme Court, who was doing some writing on the prosecution of so-called Reds, communists. And it was interesting, but I was not a researcher. And also I had to start writing my law review article. I just hated research and that type of stuff. I wanted to. And then I met Dick Duane, one of my classmates. He said, hey, Kerry, told me about the Law Students Civil Rights Research Council, an organization which recruited law students to go down south to help with desegregation work with attorneys, whatever. So I joined that organization, and notwithstanding my dad and my wife's father's, oh, you don't want to do that, it's not your business, well, it wasn't your business, you don't go down there, they're worried. This is going down to the summer of '65. Less than a year before, the 3 civil rights workers in Neshoba County, Mississippi, had been murdered and buried in a dam. But we went, and the sign of my wife and I were to go over to Jackson. We met with Marion Wright, now known as Marion Wright Edelman. She founded the Children's Defense Fund. And Marion was real busy with they'd arrested hundreds of young people, demonstrators, and had them locked up in the fairgrounds. Finally, Marion had time to see us, and she got us to agree to go into Neshoba, or into Sharkey and Nisqually counties, right in the Delta country, right on the Mississippi, live with the Clarence and Billy Hall and their children, Clarence Jr., about 5 or 6, and his little sister, 2 or 3. They had a little farmhouse. They were one of the few landed blacks in the area. They had 160 acres of cotton and soybeans. The Mississippi River was right over the levee. Sometimes my wife and I, in the evenings, would go sit on the levee and feel a little breeze. And my job was to recruit parents to agree to send their kids to the newly integrated white school. The judge for that area, the federal judge, had issued an order ordering desegregation under a freedom of choice plan. This was for first, second, and third grade, so these are old tots. And if they elected to, they were free to choose, freedom of choice, to go to the white school. So my job was to go around and talk to these parents to try and get them to send their kids to the white school. The Big Defense Fund provided me with a little red Volkswagen to ride around when I was doing this driving nights, lots of meetings at nights in churches, talking to groups. And the great luck of having this red Volkswagen was that there was a young man living in Sharkey County who drove a red Volkswagen. He's about my age. And driving up and down doing my work, people would beep at me thinking I was him. Well, a little gesture, well, let me tell you, if they'd known who I was and what I was doing, the gesture would have been a little different. Anyway, and all that summer, driving at night around, never got beat up, never got hassled. I was being taken care of. We eventually got about 30 kids into the white school. Never got hassled. I got pulled over once by a Mississippi State patrolman. A guy about my age pulled me over. I thought, this is it. I got out of the car and, hey, I just want to talk to you. You want to know what I was doing, why I was there. Nice guy said, oh, look, I don't agree with what you're doing, but just don't break any laws and you'll be okay. So, the relevance of that is that while we lived with this black family and their kids, we became part of that family. We became part of that community. And that really opened my eyes and prepared me for what happened next. Went back to school and finished up. It was towards the end of the third year of law school. Excuse me. And I was interviewing for a job. Now, all my friends who were also law review candidates, I wasn't anymore, I'd given that up. But if you're up 10, 20%, you get these firms from New York, San Francisco, interviewing these big firms. And so I always being interviewed from this guy from New York. We're in this little office at Bolt Hall, and he's, in those days, I guess you could smoke inside, because he's got a cigar. He smoked a cigar, and I'm sitting there, and got my tie on my suit. He's got a tie, but it's still loose, and the buttons are pulling apart on his shirt because he's a little overweight. He's sitting back with a cigar, and he's big legs about me. Well, Kerry, let me tell you what I got for you. We hire our associates like you, and we put them down in what we call the dog pit. The dog pit. What in the world? And when we want a little research done, we just send down to the dog pit for one of you dogs. Well, that decided a big firm wasn't for me. Of course, there was one guy, and I'm sure that wasn't a real good indication. But the next interview I had was with the Justice Department, Civil Rights Division. And a guy named Douglas, who was a cousin of Justice Douglas, interviewed me, and he said, look, knew about my work in the South. He said, you'll be the first active white civil rights worker that we've assigned, and we're going to send you to Mississippi. So you got to keep your nose clean. You're going to be on a trial basis. So I got that job. And then started my practice. One Sunday, my wife and I were getting Matthew and Susanna and the kids, 3 and 1, trying to get ready for church. At that time, we were going to the church right over here across the corner, the Methodist church, kitty corner across the way. And I tell you, trying to get 2 kids ready for church, get yourself ready. That's it. My wife said, let's just not go this Sunday. Let's just have coffee too. So we didn't go that Sunday. We were living on Dana Street in Oakland. I walked over to Telegraph Avenue, just walked away and bought a Chronicle at the black and white liquor store and came back and said, I'm lying on the floor looking at the sport page. My wife was sitting at the kitchen table reading and she said, hey, Kerry, look at this. She hands me the newspaper and it's got a picture, and I've got a copy of that picture here, of these 2 kids, fraternal twins, whose parents had abandoned them. They were in foster care up in Solano County. And my wife didn't want to have very many more kids, but we always wanted to have more kids, and we'd been thinking about someday we'll adopt. She says, look, and you know, I fell in love with those kids. So my wife cut the picture out of the Chronicle and put it on this little cork bulletin board that we had by the kitchen table. And my daughter Susanna, who was 3, was over there constantly, day after day. When are the twins? She had a lisp. When are the twins coming? When are the twins coming? When are the twins coming? Well, eventually, we did the home study and we adopted these kids. And that was another nudge on my life, another silent voice in the direction of my life. Again, didn't give it a lot of thought. But then just a few weeks ago, Mike, where are you, Mike?
Not here.
There he is back there. A few months ago, Mike and I belong to the same golf club. We're golfing together. And Mike, I tell for some reason, afterwards we're having a drink, and I tell this story about my duty station in Monterey. And Mike says, Kerry, you know, why don't you come to our men's group and tell that story? That'd be a great story. I said, well, let me think about it, Mike. I didn't say, you know, I thought about it, but, you know, even after saying, Mike, I'll think about it, I said, there's no way that I can go to church and talk about this. Really, what's it got to do? But then one day, I don't know, I'd been having these negative thoughts about it. One day I said, I'll just call him and say, you'll do it. You know, I called Mike, or I saw him up at the club. Okay, Mike, I'll speak. We arranged for this date, October 19th. So then, when I was preparing for this talk, I said, man, this is a bunch of Christian guys meeting on. They get up at 8 o'clock, or they get up early than that, and at 8 o'clock they're having breakfast. It's a churchy thing. I've got to make this a religious story, don't I? I mean, it's got to be a God thing, doesn't it? I think, well, how in the world can I weave God into my story? And I was having a hard time. I couldn't talk about having a vision, hearing a voice. That's what they want, right? That's what they want. But then it came to me. I didn't have to weave God into my story. He was there all the time. The good Lord was the warp and the woof of my life. And I thank him for that. And thank you.
Amen.
I think,
Would you like to take some questions?
yeah, well, I thought maybe, if you have any questions, I'm here to advance, and then at your tables, you might want to talk about things that happened to you that you may have thought was God's hand on your shoulder, God's voice speaking silently to you, whatever. Any questions? Yes?
Well, I think we all take it for granted, you know, but because it is what is, but you're telling the story now, that makes so much sense why Seaside has become the traditional African-American community in Monterey County. And Oceanside is the same thing down there for Camp Pendleton down there, because of the fact that the military at that time would not, you weren't able to, people didn't have access, equal access. So it's a remarkable story. We take that for granted,
Yeah.
Growing up, as I did, in actually what's become the most diverse city in the United States, Stockton, I grew up in a very segregated city because of the redlining and because of the fact that people wouldn't be able to rent, so people of color were in one location, and if you're a poor white, you were in another location. So, I think we take these things, but it's really important to hear the story and how you were able to fight against that, because it is what is, but things won't change unless we all are open to it. Because it exists today. Segregation is incredibly, you see it in the school system, absolutely, today.
Housing discrimination still goes on. I learned after we eliminated 2/3 of our listings, people started calling, okay, we'll do it. So I send a black couple out, Pacific Grove, for example, to a listing I had, and they come back and say, oh, they said it's already been rented. So I'd call that landlord, oh no, that's mistake. So they became more subtle about it. They'd listed, but then they had all excuses. So it goes on even now. In my practice, I was a volunteer attorney for Operation Sentinel, which had investigators who would pretend that they wanted to rent, as a black go first, turn down, and had a similar white couple go, and they were accepted. So we direct these cases to attorneys to prosecute. But it goes on, it's still going on today. Any other question? Yeah.
I had a comment. When I was in middle school in 1958, I met a new student, and his name was John. I was Don. I got to know him. He was a black man, boy to man, and we got along great. The next day, he wasn't there. And the next day, he wasn't there. He was never there. And that's the way they left it. And my uncle, my mother's older brother, Walter, was a Baptist minister and had his own church in East County, San Diego. And he wouldn't stand for that sort of thing. And it was great. So it really ingrained in my mind how you treat people. Not color, or how they dress, or how they talk, or what kind of car they drive, whether the wheels can go up and bounce, or whatever. You just don't. It changed my heart and mind right there.
What happened to him?
He never came back. John never came back. He was moved out. Was in the East Valley. El Cajon means the box, and that hole in the ground below Mount Helix in La Mesa was an area that large developers, Ballenbecker and Kelton, decided they were going to build single-family homes in the 60s to meet the growing demand and to fill their pockets. So that was it's stuck with me, and I have never forgotten John. And
Thank you.
Great story. Maybe we can discuss it. Go ahead.
Yeah. Let me tell you a story.
I'm just going to ask Gary. So Gary, it's amazing. Hey, back here. So all this service that you're giving, the community. I mean, so much payback. I'm curious, how, was this when you were growing up, did you see your parents doing this? I mean, why do you feel that this is something you need to do or want to do?
Hang on, let me tell you that I didn't list all the service that he has done
Oh, no,
in any way. And one of them I want to emphasize, that he worked with Art Ammon on the mission to Africa on the AIDS. And he's taken 7 trips there on the part of that, and he was on the board of Art's community. And I can go on. But one of them I did want to mention, because I saw it this morning. He's a member of the Screen Actors Guild.
That was, litigation. I was a litigation lawyer. There was a lot of stress there. And as a member of the Screen Actors Guild, I had a client that couldn't pay me once, and they said, well, look, how about I get you a little role in a film? So I became an extra, a specialized extra in a film. And actually, my part ended up on a criminal film. But anyway, that got me in the Screen Actors Guild. And I did a lot of did commercials and did print jobs. In fact, and the point is that litigation is high pressure. Being a model, I was a male model as well as and I did a lot of ads for magazines and so forth. The best one I ever had was we were shooting up at an estate up in Marin County, and they had a big lap pool. And it was for a drug for people with heart problems. And I was playing grandpa, I had a kid playing my grandson. And because I take these pills, we could drop in the pool together. And they wanted the splashes to be coordinated. So we had to have sort of a kid went in first and I went in, but the splashes had to be together. And we must have run that 20, 25 times. And each time, then I'd have to swim to the other side of the pool and pull myself out. Then I'd go over, and of course, the idea was this is we hadn't swum a long time. This is the first time me and my grandson had done this. So they had this beautiful young gal with these thick, luxurious towels, and she would towel me off. And then there was this real nice guy from San Francisco, a hairdresser, who would dry my hair and comb it. Oh, Kerry, your hair is so nice. Who dresses your hair? I mean, I was really treated well. And of course, I went home and told my wife about it. And said, well, Kerry, don't expect that kind of treatment at home. The point is that it was a release from all the stress of litigation. It was a whole other thing. And it paid pretty well, so it was fun, and they had great food and so forth. Anyway.
You vote on the Oscars?
No.
You have to polish your own star on the walk in Hollywood?
Well, I tried to put one there, but they arrested me. Anyway, your question was about my background, what led me to this. My dad was he never went to college. He wanted to be a physician, and he wanted to be a surgeon. He blew a finger and a thumb while playing with a dynamite cap. Never went to school. He became a jack of all trades. And in Alaska, he became a territorial policeman. This is before Alaska was a state. And he tells stories that he'd stop people for drunk driving, and had a federal magistrate there who handled these cases, because it's a territory. And she'd lock these guys up, take their license, and the dad, on first offenses, he'd take their keys, he'd drive them home and say, look, sober up. I'm not going to tell Rose, that's the name of the magistrate, I'm not going to tell Rose about this arrest. I'm not going to arrest you. I will the next time, I'll get you again. He'd take their keys, drive them home, and later give them back the keys, rather than arrest them. He had a heart. He was a cop, but he had a big heart. So that was an example. And he was always available to help people with things. But as far as racial things, it's just, there were blacks up there. There was Fort Richardson and Elmore Hill. Fort Richardson was there at the time. And of course, as you know, a good portion of the armed services were African Americans. So, but I only had about three kids in my high school, but, you know, he did a lot of things. He drove a taxi, he was a plumber, he was a carpenter, and we didn't lack or anything. Dad was very innovative from on. We had this place that had been an army shack that he fixed up and didn't have running water, so Dad dug a well below the kitchen and put in a pump, so rather than have to go outside and pump water, Mom would stand at her sink and pump water right into the sink. So I had examples of good parents who cared about people. No examples of anything with regard to other races. Other than playing football with children, we played football together. But again, we played football together, but we didn't do the same friends, didn't move in the same groups. It's just, there was still that kind of a separation, but there wasn't that we didn't want to be with children. It's just, well, it happened, okay? Things like that happened. So, but I can't recall any, well, let me stop that one. When I decided to go to Mississippi with my wife, my dad was all over me. In fact, I didn't bring the letter. He wrote a long 2-page letter about, it's not your problem, you know, let them solve it themselves. What have you been down there for? But he was worried. You know, people have been killed down there, so much for her. And it was more out of fear than disliking blacks or not being sympathetic to the black cause. It was just, he couldn't see beyond his worry about me. But I can understand that. If I had a kid that wanted to go and do service work in Afghanistan, I'd probably just ignore it. Any other questions?
Amazing service, Kerry, really.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Good job. Thank you.